And a very good afternoon, everybody. Welcome in to another edition of This Week in Phillies Baseball. I'm your host, James Scorza, with you, and with me, as always, is a group of companions on a very busy, lazy weekend. I guess I can say the most importantly for the Fighting Phillies, but more importantly, like that, we'll talk about all things included. Joey Marks and Mark Baker joins me tonight on this latest edition. Gentlemen, first and foremost, how are you guys on this very important Monday?
Good man, good. I'm doing well. I'm not sure how the Phillies are doing, but
Yeah, but
Yeah,
most.
I wouldn't want to be working in the front office right now. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, I actually to this I guess we could say this is going to be more of a therapy session to try to get everything off our chest about what the Phillies have done the last couple of days or so. So I'm going to try to wing it any way we can. So let's get into the weekly recap like we always do every single game. Obviously, we talk about this, that, and the other, but the week looked like the Phillies were just one step and one moving one step further and probably 5, 6 steps back. So the question I want to ask you, most importantly, to start off this show here today, is just simply put, I mean, how can the Phillies get out of this slump that they are in these last couple games? Because it's been really sloppy and it's keep on getting more sloppy. So, Joe, how does this Phillies team get back to the same groove that they had around the winning streak they had a couple weeks ago? But how can they get back on track here after a very disappointing week in the whole city of Philadelphia?
you know, I'm gonna maybe sound very simplistic when I say this, but I
Mm-hmm.
I genuinely mean it. To get Bryce Harper back in the lineup, to get
Yeah.
him healthy back in the lineup, because here's the thing: this lineup looks like listless, and like they don't have direction, they don't have heart without Harper. And honestly, when Harper was struggling early on in the season, I honestly didn't know what way to point it. But
Mm-hmm.
I don't think this team goes if Harper doesn't go. And like that
Yeah.
is a real red flag, because Harper's only going to get older, and those nagging injuries are only going to reoccur over and over again.
Yeah. In a way, it kind of reminds me a little bit of a Mike Trout when he was like starting to hit that, and like trying to hit that ceiling, like when he was like look. I mean, he looked like he was a fantastic player, and then he had to lack the injuries and also had to deal with those injury bugs. But Mark, same question to you. I mean, is there any way the Phillies can come out of this slump? Because it feels like it's been a long time coming for this Phillies team. But I gotta say right now, is there any possibility that the Phillies can finally break this camel's back for some reason? Because I feel like they're like lost right now.
Yeah, I mean they're way too talented to not. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
but think about it this way: is that this Phillies team in particular, there's an anxiety. You go through ups and downs during a baseball season,
Mm-hmm.
but particularly for this team, a run like this is more daunting. Partially because this offseason you're going to have to make certain decisions.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't, if you don't, I mean, at this point, if you don't win a championship, uh, you're going to have tough decisions. And even if you do, even if the Phillies turn it around and they go on, they go on, they beat the Dodgers, and they can go on and win the World Series, you're still going
Mm-hmm.
to have to make those tough decisions. The Phillies are in
Yeah.
a really tough position right now. Um, Partially because they're going to one, they know they have to make certain decisions in the offseason, and they might have to consider the idea of rebuilding, which makes any not even baseball, any franchise anxious, especially when you kind of know that this might be the year where you do it, and if you don't, then we got to start talking about the future. And you don't see teams like LA. You don't see teams like San Diego, Cleveland. I'll even give the Mets a little bit of credit. You don't see those teams because partially, if you have a bad stretch, you have a future. You have a lot of aging players in their final year of the deal. So these ups and downs really matter because at the end of the day, you might not have we got next year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the thing about it too is that it feels like it's been a broken record for the last handful of years with this Phillies team. Because you think about obviously in 2022 they got to the World Series and they got like a lot of good players out of it. And also like the Bellum at the bank, and even like they were 1 win shy from capturing their second World Series in the last 13 seasons. But more importantly than anything like that, I felt like after that World Series champion, or I'm sorry, the when they won the National League pennant in 2022. The next year they lost in the NLCS, and then 2024 they lost in the NLDS. And I kind of felt like it was back in 20. I think it was like 2007 when they won the National League East, and then the next year they won the World Series, and then the year after that they lost the World Series. But the difference was they didn't win a World Series in that time span from 2022 to 2025 now. But honestly, I'm sitting here. I'm trying to sit back and trying to watch a Phillies game once in a while, but sometimes it kind of feels like you're just like I can't even explain how like the team is. I mean, the team looks right now. They look like they're lost without Harper. I do agree with Joey said about that because like ever since Harper's injury, I feel like they don't have a plan B in place. And I think the other thing that's really gonna cause a concern too with that is that if it continues to go down this road when Harper is not there, I mean, what do you do when the off season comes around and you have to, or not the off season, but I'm talking about in the trade deadline rather, and you have to make those moves. I mean, Joey, I mean, you look at this team right now. Is there any possibility that if the Phillies can get back to the reality that there were the last handful of years from that 2022, 2024 years like before they got to this point? Because it feels like it's the same old song and dance at this point.
So here's my thing: is I can't keep flip flopping on and off this boat
Sure.
because it feels like the Phillies are making us all crazy as fans.
Of
Like
course.
we are seeing the best team in the major leagues, and the next minute we're seeing a team that can barely squeak out a win against the Pittsburgh Pirates, who aren't even close to the best team in the major leagues.
Sure.
So and get swept. The idea that I feel kind of frantic in my opinion. This is where I've landed, and it ain't going to be the most popular, and it may not even be the most rational, but I am in it with this team. I made the commitment to be in it with this team, and so I'm going to stick with that. That I agree with Mark. Like I feel like this team has the talent, has enough talent. Like, let me be clear. They have enough talent. Let's stop. I know people have like complained about Dave Dombrowski not having done anything.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Dave Dombrowski is the guy who constructed this team.
Yeah.
He's the guy that has brought Schwarber, Castellanos, Turner. He's the guy that, puts this nucleus around Bryce Harper.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some cachet like to deal with that. Christopher Sanchez and Ranger Suarez, guys like Lazardo. Okay, our bullpen's a mess. We get that. Not everything could be perfect. But for what it's worth, if you look at the roster on paper between the Pirates and the Blue Jays and the Phillies,
Mm-hmm.
anybody, not win-loss, but just anybody, if you were told you had to pick one roster to go the rest of the way in the season, which roster would you pick? And everyone probably hands down would pick the Phillies.
Mm-hmm.
And that shouldn't be an indictment on Dave Dombrowski because he hasn't added Juan Soto or
Right.
didn't add, someone as big as Kyle Tucker,
Mm-hmm.
like that. You can't just ridicule the guy in the point of reference right now, like in present day,
Mm-hmm.
when you wouldn't be where you are if it wasn't for where that guy put you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Mark, that's a great. That's actually a good point there, Joe. I think that's the most important thing. The thing I want to ask Mark here is that this is a good question I like to ask here too. Is speaking of Dabrowski, I mean, like if you look at the moves that the Phillies have to make in this off, I keep on saying off season because it feels like the season's been such a grind, and so on and so forth. But if you're in Dave Dabrowski's shoes right now, the trade deadline's coming before you know it. I mean, what will be the one priority coming into Dabrowski's book? What would be your top priority come trade deadline that the Phillies need, especially in this trade deadline?
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know if the trade deadline will even be able to satisfy this, because ultimately what you need is a young tone setter.
Mm-hmm.
Harper's getting up there in age. Turner has done well. I mean, he's probably one of the more consistent hitters on this roster at this point. But would you call him a tone setter? I mean, maybe down the road. Definitely. Harper had his struggles in his late 20s. Machado in his late 20s, and just Trey Turner. Maybe this is like Trey Turner's turning this around, but how long do you really want to wait for that? Because ultimately you have a bit of an aging roster. Like, who can you come in to be that tone setter?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you have talent, but do you have that guy? And for the past couple of years, it was Bryce Harper, but now you see he's had a bit of health concerns, and they're experimenting with new things. And
yep,
like, I mean, you have the Phillies on paper, they have everything that they need, but do they have that guy with that it factor? Rojas is probably one of the fastest guys in baseball, but is he really that kind of guy that I would trust with the Phillies? That they're back against the wall in September or October. Mm-hmm. No, he's a pretty fast guy. And I think that's what the Phillies are really struggling with, is who's really gonna be that guy, because this is kind of a test for what might come in September. You might hit a hot team in September. You're gonna need to have that guy that's that you really can trust.
So yeah. I wanted to ask you something, Mark, about that, because that is going to be a topic not just for now, but it's going to be a topic going forward. And I got to ask, you brought up about a young tone setter. Now, my question is, and you brought up some of these teams that bring up these young players to be those young tone setters. My question is, historically, the Phillies have not brought up young players from their farm system to the majors because they're just fearful of, shelling their confidence and, destroying what could be a great prospect. And now, they might only be a fair prospect in the majors. My question to you, Mark, is do the Phillies have that young tone setter in the farm system in your mind?
Which brings me to my other point, is that, while they do need to get younger, it's how is that going to solve for 2025? I don't really know how that's going to, and I don't know who you really can get in the deadline that's really going to be an impact player. Kepler's been better, and he's been better than Austin Hayes, but last year when we tried to make a move for a younger guy, it backfired. So I do understand that point. That point that's coming is that I don't really know if we really can get younger in our farm system.
Well, I mean, do you believe we have someone in our farm system that can come up and be that young tone setter to change the tone of this major league, like a JT Crawford? We brought up what was it, the third baseman that came in this weekend to play. That you have Aiden Miller, you have these guys that could potentially come up, but historically the Phillies have just not really been all that comfortable putting young kids up here too soon because they're just afraid that it's not going to work out. But if you look around the league, you got guys that are 19, 20 that are coming up because these clubs are giving them an opportunity, and some of these guys are thriving with it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the other thing I guess the one thing I like to see, like what the Phillies do in this, hopefully in the next couple months or so, is just to see what the young guys have in store here. Because I mean, even you guys brought up with the guys. I mean, is even Michkovsky joins us right now. By the way, if you're tuning in, hit that like and subscribe button on our channel. He says the best part about the Phillies is the food. It's hey, look. If I mean, I always learned a long time ago. Once you like, if you're the Phillies depress you every day, just go to the concourse and get a lot of food, and like there's a lot of budget on that food,
Yeah.
on those food prices. You know what I mean? But no, to piggyback what you said about this too, Joe, about the farm system here. It's interesting because you think about this Phillies team that they bring up like these young players like from the farm system, but they're not like an Aiden Miller, they're not like a Justin Crawford yet, but they I guess they try to straddle the fences sometimes. They try to like I guess try to I guess the perfect way to put it is that they bring some of the young players up from the farm system, but they're okay, but sometimes just okay is not okay at the same time. I mean, you want to bring up the farm. I mean, if the Phillies are going to look to try to find what you have with that same kind of cohesiveness, what the Phillies need to do this season is that if this is like a lost season, maybe you should bring up some of those farm players up to see what they have in store for the upcoming future too. I mean, am I right?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, having Otto Kemp come up and seeing just
Yeah.
in a short window of time what he's got, okay, that's giving you a glimpse. But
Mm-hmm.
then you look at like the other couple, top level prospects that we have in our farm system with JT Crawford and Aiden Miller. We don't
Mm-hmm.
know what they have, and I get it. There's a fear in the front office of bringing those guys up too fast. And as our old friend Frank Finnegan would say, they're not ready. They're not ready, but
Right.
they have to get ready. Like that's the other part of this. Like at
Yeah.
least with Mick Abel, like he got put into the fire against two good pitchers,
Yeah.
and he hung with two good pitchers. And like a year and a half ago, we were saying Mick Abel's not ready.
Mm-hmm.
But guess what? Like you don't know until you throw him into the fire.
Yeah, and the other thing too is that you don't want to Ryan Howard this situation too and wait until he's like 26, 27, which
Exactly.
you know what I'm saying? It's like the same thing. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
like you want to bring in that young talent. You got to bring in that young talent right now before it gets like you said, but like to see what you have in store for the upcoming season. I mean, you never know. I mean, once you bring a player up, he could be like, I mean, I want to like dare I say Dominic Brown situation like, but I mean, you never know with players. I mean, the players
Yeah. But Don Brown at least gave you at least a great half season,
that he
and
did.
maybe his flame flickered too quickly.
Yeah.
But maybe that was also had to do with where we were in our roster. Don Brown came in and up when Ryan Howard and Jimmy Rollins and Chase Utley were on their way out. So
Mm-hmm.
Don Brown was a star, but he just was a star at the wrong moment in time
Yeah.
in this organization.
Yeah.
As
John Mayberry is a good example of that too.
Yeah.
right, and maybe even J.P. Crawford's another good
Yep.
example of that.
Good
Like
point.
the idea that what Mark brought up about these aging players, they may be aging, they're still talent, and so if you're going to flip this roster over at some point, you have to evaluate what you have in the farm system. That way you understand or don't give yourself the illusion that you have pieces in the farm system.
Mm-hmm.
Like that you have good pieces. You yourself just said it, James, and you hit the nail on the head. Okay is not just okay. Not when
Right.
you hit the majors. It can be okay, if you have a supporting cast like a Bryce Harper and a Trey Turner, but you take those training wheels off and you expect that player to be more than okay and they're not, then your franchise is back into the 2012-2013 Phillies.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny you mentioned that because I was thinking about this earlier because I said to myself, like after that 2011 NLDS one and they lost
Mm.
1-0 to the Cardinals, it felt like after that it was like starting to like become like a Jenga block, just going down and down and down after that. It's just like you think about 2012, they were not the same team. I guess they were
Nope.
starting to get older. Charlie Manuel was on the hot seat. He was on the verge of getting fired by the team. But more importantly than anything like that, I mean, it has to come down to two is that if the Phillies want to make this jump now, I mean, they they got to find a way to try to figure out what they have in store with these young guys too. I mean, you never thought Reese Hoskins was going to be something when he came up. I mean, he actually tore the baseball off in his first month of the season. And it's the same thing with Al Bohm. I mean, yeah, I mean, these players are good players, but is this the team? I mean, are these players going to be good enough to get you another World Series title? I mean, right now it doesn't look like that way.
I mean, I'll look at two prime examples that are out there, two of the hottest possible trade pieces that are out there. And Mark, you can kind of, respond to this. Is that when you talk about getting younger, sure, you would like to trade the older veterans to get young, but that's more difficult to do. Sometimes it's about creating younger assets to be able to make your team better. Someone like Paul Skeens and someone like Mason Miller, like those two guys are young players, but got brought up early in the organization. They're stars. But the interesting thing is they're probably not long for the teams that they are currently on. You might not see Paul Skeens in a Pittsburgh Pirate uniform in the next 2 or 3 years. You may not see Mason Miller in an Athletics uniform in the next 2 or 3 years. Why? Because that organization looks at them as a way to pay out the investment and pay it out with bigger dividends, even if it means younger players. So my question to you, Mark, is do you see someone like, Otto Kemp and, Mick Abel, Painter, who's not even up yet, but is being, touted that he will be, guys like Aiden Miller and JT Crawford? Do you see any of those guys as someone we could bring up and possibly turn into our version of a Mason Miller or, Paul Skeens?
Yeah, I mean that would be the smarter route to go, because look at it now, right? San Diego is now with the Juan Soto trade. They're now reaping the consequences of that, as C.J. Abrams and James Woods are the best, arguably one of the best 1-2 punches in the league, and Mackenzie Gore is now a strikeout machine. And what did the Padres get? Soto's not even on San Diego anymore. So, learning from that trade, it's better just to see with what you have, because if you go out and if you try to push for someone like a Paul Skeens or a Mason Miller, like you're giving up talent and you're going to watch. I mean, do I trust Pittsburgh do something with Mick Abel or Otto Kemp? I don't trust that Pittsburgh would really, if they can't do it with Skeens, they're certainly not going to do it with Mick Abel. Right. But it's better to see that what you have in the tank rather than try to go for it all, because then the Padres may be good, but they're going to have a lot of financial consequences down the road for that decision. And they didn't get that. They didn't get that trophy. I think it's just better to see with what you have.
Yeah, it's a very good point, too. I mean, I think the thing that takes out of it, too, is that you think about what Paul Skeens did yesterday with this Phillies team, and even though the players around him, I mean, they got the O'Neill Cruzes and even like a veteran presence with Andrew McCutchen, too. I mean, kind of like the Phillies have right now, but the problem is that the Phillies have the expectations to try to do something now. I mean, that's going to be the most important key, is that I understand the Pirates are trying to rebuild, but at the same time, they'll be back to where they were in those early 2010s. But then I look at the Phillies team, it's like, okay, now you've been here before 3 times already. It's kind of reminding me of, like, we even brought it up a couple of weeks ago, Joe, on our show, Pass and Have Sports Show, that it's kind of reminding me of that 2001 to 2004 Philadelphia Eagles team, that they were like, they got there, and then the next year they went back, but they never went out. They could never climb that. They could never get over that hump. Yeah. And I think that's what the Phillies team is like now, is that they got to a World Series, they lost it. They lost to the NLCS, they got to the NLDS. I mean, it's just kind of like how it has that, like after that World Series run, the only difference was they didn't get a World Series out of it too. But the problem
I think it's worse, and I think it's reverse. I agree with you, but I think it's reverse. Like the Eagles they kept trying and trying and trying, and then they got over the hump in 2004 and failed. Okay, you failed against whom? Like the Patriots, that were like one of
And
the best
Tampa, yeah,
teams. Right.
right.
So, okay, that being said, the Phillies did it the opposite way. They got to the World Series and they faced like a juggernaut in Houston.
Yeah,
Okay. But
I
now
don't disagree with you right there saying that. I'm just
but
saying,
now they're regressing backwards. And
yeah,
it's
exactly. That's what I'm saying.
evidence. Yeah.
Yeah, the regressing is a good word too, because like you think about this team, like the Phillies have to do whatever they can to. I mean, if this year doesn't go the way we expect it to go, it could actually go in the same direction as the Padres. I mean, down the road, it's going to come back and hurt them with with the salary and all that too, of all the players that they got in the farm system too. So it'll be interesting to see. Mitch Kovsky checks in again. He says, "Fire Rob Thompson, please." I mean, yeah, I'm starting to get a little skeptical about Topper too. But Joe, you got something about that?
Yeah, I'm not sure Rob's the problem.
Yeah.
I don't even think and again I go back to I don't think Dave's the problem. Look, does Topper make some questionable decisions? Sure. But there are some plays out there in the outfield, and I brought this up to you before, James.
Mm-hmm.
There are some plays out in the outfield that should be made and aren't being made. They're
That's fair.
little league plays, and they're not being made by professional ball players. Rob Thompson can be Tony Lasorda, or reimagined, and the idea is that these outfielders still wouldn't catch it. And like you can lay into an outfielder and say, look, what the hell's wrong with you? I mean, and Topper did. He told Marsh after he, let a ball drop in the night before, he said, no, you got to run through it. Like, the hell with it if you overshoot your target. Like, fine, you overshoot your target. You ran too fast. Let's worry about that problem when it happens. No, you run through it and you make the catch.
Yeah.
And, that is Topper being a manager. But
Mm-hmm.
there is a part of this where it's the players.
Mm.
It's whatever, like, this is why I say it's the reverse. Like, the Eagles were haunted that they couldn't get over that hump until 2004. The
Mm-hmm.
Phillies are haunted that they did, and they can't get back to the mountaintop.
They did that. Like they're trying the best they can to climb that mountaintop, but they're getting mentally and physically exhausted.
Yep. It's the
Yeah.
players, not the manager.
Yeah, that's a good point. Mark, you got anything to add before we move on?
I mean, oh yeah, I mean that's but it's very typical of like the Philadelphia, as particular Philadelphia sports media market is that blame those upstairs, and sometimes you have the organizational structure. Sometimes you just need to have a conversation of like, do we really have the right talent? And sometimes the question is no. And because you have to ask yourself is that we went on a big run in 2022, and that Astros team was one of the more dominant postseason teams, in recent memory. But since then, we've been the hunted, and we haven't really. Usually are one of those teams that what you're going to get when you see us every series. And again, it's that we've got the big punch, but we don't have that. We struggle with that little small ball game. When things are going well, we're relying on the home run ball. Mm-hmm. But like these little details, they come to bite us. And I don't know if that's necessarily the front office's problem. I think that's more of like you just sometimes don't have the players. Sometimes you hit lightning in a bottle. Sometimes, and this is where in like sports in general. I mean, I don't know if you guys remember this, but in 2000 when the Ravens won the Super Bowl, they let go of Trent Dilfer. And a lot of people were like, how could you do that? Like, he won you a Super Bowl. The emotion of the game is like, how could you do this? But it actually ended up being a smart move because Elvis Gerbach, who replaced him, actually had better numbers. Sometimes as an organization, you can let go of players that have these this emotional tie to the city, partially because at the end of the day, like the organization is judged based off of, especially the Phillies, of, you know, did you win a championship or not? And that's, you know, we can talk about what happened, but it's a matter of like what we do this year and what we do beyond this year, which,
Right.
you know, the Dodgers and other organizations have that vision. It's just that, do the Phillies really have that vision? And if they do they have the players?
Yeah.
Well,
Joe, you got anything to add?
yeah. I mean, here's my thing: is the one part of that Ravens analogy is when Dilfer got let go. First off, Dilfer wasn't the reason they won the Super Bowl. The defense was. Second, when, you know, about a couple of years later, the Ravens drafted Joe Flacco, who then took them to another Super Bowl championship. The idea is that you have to figure out what the next chapter looks like. And I mean, here's my thing, and I don't want to, oversimplify it, because it is still a big problem. And you're right that they have to learn how to do small ball, because in the fall it is going to get colder again. But however, in the summer, the ball flies out of the yard. And so my feeling is, if your identity for your team is hit home runs, then you better hit home runs better than everyone else.
That's true.
And like, that's the difference. But if you can't hit home runs better than everybody else all season long, and you can only do it when it's 90 degrees plus, then you got a real problem, because you play the games that matter when it's not 90 degrees plus.
Yep. And the last thing I'll say about this too is that even like when there's like days like, I mean, this should be like the dog days of summer and also hitting season, like what Joe Emmanuel will allude to. Not seeing Schwarber hit a lot of home runs, and also see a lot of batters and hitters do the same, have that same level of inconsistency. I mean, it's kind of feel like it has that same kind of ripple effect as they did last year too, as well.
Yeah, and look, it's like, I'm not trying to be too cliche with the hitting season and not trying to give them an out. But like I said, I got to defend the team that I feel like I gotta go down with the ship. Like,
Yep.
if I'm going to plant my flag and say this is the team I feel like has the best chance of winning, the World Series, as crazy as that might sound after this past weekend, I still got to plant my flag and stick by it right now.
Yeah, you're entitled to, Joe. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, look, I want to be a believer too, but sometimes like a believer has its ups and highs and lows at the same time too.
Yep.
Speaking of highs and lows this season, the bullpen has been a disappointment as of lately. Obviously, you thought about the. I think the one thing I always get a question about this, but I'd like to say about this too, about Jordan Romano or Jordan Romano. Excuse me. I thought that was a bad trade. I thought that was a really bad trade. I would have thought Jeff Hoffman would have probably could have been a lot easier to be the guy to like build around your bullpen. I've seen enough of him. I mean, I've seen enough of the level of just him just trying to save a game, and it's like on the skin of your teeth, it's so unbelievable sometimes that I sit there and say that I want to believe in him. I want to believe in him. I mean, yes, Jose Alvarado, he's not going to be around for 80 games, obviously, with that suspension, and that was a real kill to the bullpen. But that guy has to step up his game too. I mean, it can't just fall on Jose Alvarado's shoulders. I mean, you have to. I mean, in the words of Mike Malk will call it, you got to become the closer when the time is needed. I mean, the problem is with this Phillies team is that, yeah, they have one guy here that's good, and there's another guy that's inconsistent. I mean, it's kind of like it's like one side is good and one side is the other. It's like in one ear and out the other. I mean, it's just like you got to. I don't know if it's that. I mean, look, I don't know if it's probably that he's just inconsistent, and I think he's just not that good, and I think it was just a waste of a trade. But what do you guys? What's your immediate reaction when you guys look at your Jordan Romano? And I mean, is he just bad, or is this, or Mike? I mean, I'll ask you this. Is this fixable for Jordan Romano to try to get back on track here? Joe, let's start with you.
No,
Thoughts?
and like
Exactly.
that. This is one of the things that really kicked me in the teeth this weekend. We saw two former bullpen pieces on other teams
Mm-hmm.
facing off and beating us. You had Jeff Hoffman with the Blue Jays, and
Yep.
you had Bailey Falter with the Pittsburgh Pirates. The idea that we've let more of this bullpen go, and look, me and James, me and you ripped this bullpen to shreds
Tons of
two,
times.
two seasons, 2 or 3 seasons ago when we had all these guys.
Oh,
We
yeah.
ripped them to shreds, and they proved us wrong. Now, that being said, guys like Sir Anthony Dominguez have kind of taken a down spiral. Not necessarily a death spiral, but a down spiral with the Orioles. You
Mm-hmm.
have guys like Bailey Falter, who is kind of par for the course for Pittsburgh Pirates. You got Jeff Hoffman, who early on was one of the better closers in the league for the Blue Jays. This is where I could blame Dave Dombrowski,
Mm-hmm.
is that you let these guys walk out the door. Now I get it. You paid money where you paid money. Like, this is why I say, as Philly fans, whether you like it or hate it, we planted our flag behind this theory of we're going to pay for bigger bats than we will for bigger pitching.
Mm-hmm.
And that started with the contract of Bryce Harper. And it continued with, Trey Turner, and it continued with, Kyle Schwarber and Castellanos and stuff like that. Even JT Realmuto, even though his contract's not as bloated as everybody else's, but still, like, that perspective started with Bryce Harper. And the bottom line is, we planted our flag as a fan base behind the ownership, behind the management that said, this is the way we're going to go. So you're going to have to deal with not having the best of pitching.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Same question to you, Mark. You think with this bullpen now, like that's what, actually it's not more just Jordan Romano. I think it's more the bullpen. Is there a way this bullpen could be fixed? In your opinion?
I would believe so. I don't have a lot of faith,
Mm-hmm.
but I believe based off of the talent of this bullpen that we do have enough. But it comes down to all three phases of the game. I mean, I as you were asking the question, I was thinking about the home run that Romano gave up to Alejandro Kirk in that second game of the series, and I look at that and Mick Gable gave up one run in 2 games. That's some of this I feel like is a phase of the game type of issue. Mm-hmm. Is that when other phases of the game are struggling, ultimately it's the bullpen that is going to be noticed as the one that is to blame. When simply a lot of our offensive struggles have kind of gone under the radar, and we look at the bullpen because they're ultimately the ones that are doing the final straw and losing us the game.
Sure.
But I don't have a lot of faith in Romano, but he's a 2-time All-Star. He's shown flashes, and besides, I mean, right now this is kind of like the existential crisis for the Phillies. Is that do you change nothing and just go to see where this will take you, mm-hmm. or do you try to change something up? I don't know which one of those two, because some of this they come to if all our first 2 phases of the game are our starting pitching, our offense, if those two are in sync, it takes a lot of pressure off of the bullpen. But I don't know. I don't have a lot of faith, but I'm kind of this, throughout this discussion, more of the variety of just maybe sometimes the best thing is to do nothing. If it doesn't work out, at least our initial inkling is right. As an organization, like we knew at the end of the day, this might not be working, and we were right. Mm-hmm. It's even better if we're wrong.
Yeah, definitely. The last thing I'll say about this with the bullpen too is that it feels like it's been like even me and Joey alluded to it like 2-3 years ago. It's been like a running trend with this bullpen. Either it was like Corey Knebel, or it was like a Jose Alvarado, or the list goes on and on. Even like a Craig Kimbrell here and there. What's that?
Hector Neris.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, there's no Brad Lidges and Ryan Madson to come in and save the day, so that's gonna just. I mean,
that's the part that really gives me no confidence, because I don't look at that bullpen and I don't look at the moves that are possible and say there's a Brad Lidge out there that we can trade for that can come in mid-season and save it.
Yep.
There isn't that person.
You know what's funny, Joe? I remember there was a time we actually put Zach Eflin in the bullpen, and he actually was pretty good in that. I said to myself, so it was just like that. That was kind of like the Ted SQ that kind of reminds me of what kind of a season that the Phillies had in 2022. Because early on in this season, that bullpen was really shaky too. In 2022, before Knebel went down, and they started to get better, and then 2023 they were good, but they were not at the level. But like you said, like we brought it up too, is that I don't trust Jordan Romano to be that guy to close the door. I mean, it felt like early on, like he tried to twist our logic into a pretzel a little bit to try to figure out. Yeah, I mean, there's games that he'll have good games, and there's other games that he would be just trying to pull your hair out at sometimes about with the level of consistency he had. But overall, I think it's going to be whatever this bullpen's going to look like down the road. That's where it's going to take this team. Wherever the team takes them, that's where the bullpen's going to take them too.
Yeah. I think the starting pitching is going to always give this team a chance to stay in games. But if the offense happens to, respond when needed, will this bullpen blow that up?
Yeah.
Will I mean, I remember it was a couple games ago where the hitting actually happened. We put up 7 runs, and the bullpen gave up all those runs, and that can't happen. I mean,
no.
If you have one facet where your offense is working, and like Mark said earlier about the small ball, if they're actually able to produce multiple runs in a game, and your starting pitching for the most part goes 6 or 7 strong innings, you as a bullpen need to know this has to be one we close out.
Yeah, absolutely. So Mark, you got anything to add before we move on?
Yeah, I mean, you're going to need all the offense may take some time to recover. I mean, you're going to have to hope that your starting pitching really carries you. I mean, it won't be able to sustain long term, but you're going to have that spark. And the one area in which the Phillies can get that spark is really through their starting pitching, which has really brought them to where they are right now.
Yeah, I mean that's going to be the most important key, like in these games coming up this week, as the Phillies have 3 against the Cubs, and then they have a rematch with the Blue Jays, this time at CBP on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday afternoon. All right, so let's get into our upcoming series preview matchup. Like I just mentioned, the Phillies and the Cubs tonight, the first of 3 here at CBP, as the bullpen. I'm sorry, not the bullpen, but for the starting probable pitchers for Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. First, we got Zach Weber going tonight for the Phillies. He's 6-2 this season and has a 2.96 earned run average, and he'll be opposed by Matthew Boyd, who's 5-3 this season and has a 3.01 ERA. Tomorrow, McAble makes his 3rd start in the majors, and it's good to see McAble back again in the Phillies lineup. So it'll be kind of anxious to see what he'll look like tomorrow night, as he is 1-0 this season and has an ERA of 0.79. So this will be his second start, and he has 11 strikeouts on the year. And he'll be opposed by Colin Ree, who is 4-2 this season and has a 3.59 ERA for the Cubs. And to close out the series on Wednesday, it will be Jesus Luzardo for the Phillies, and looking to try to get his sixth win on the season after or maybe three bad starts the last few games, and looking to try to get back on track here, hopefully on Wednesday, as he has a 5-2 record this season and has now an ERA of 4.46. And they'll be opposed by Ben Brown on that Wednesday afternoon, and he is 3-4 this season and has an ERA of 5.37. So, Joe, Mark, and then I guess the pitchers for the Blue Jay series is to be announced on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. But overall, what are your expectations for the upcoming week for the Phillies? Mark, I'll start with you first.
Yeah, I mean, our starting pitching is going to have to carry us through this series. And unfortunately, Chicago is has one of the best offenses in baseball, and that's a big ask. I mean, the one area in which I do have confidence in the Phillies is their starting pitching. Mm-hmm. However, I will say this: at Wrigley, they were able to break through the Cubs at their own game. So there is like possibility. The Phillies may be struggling right now, but the Phillies have shown that they can beat these juggernaut offenses at their own game. They've done it. They've done it in the past against the Braves. They've done it in the series against the Cubs at Wrigley. There is a possibility, but the strongest suit of the Phillies this year has been their starting pitching. Against Toronto, last week, and this is one perspective of last week, is that Toronto has one of the best home records in baseball. Right. They are going to be in a contention of a wild card, barring a collapse. Pittsburgh, their front office is a lot of the cause of their problems. They have a lot of talent. Sure. One of a glass half full perspective is that the Phillies did lose to a competitive AL wild card team, and also they might have got swept. They got swept by arguably a pretty decent roster, or at least a roster that has talent. Sure. And that I think matters coming back home. Phillies are good at home. They have shown that even at Wrigley, they've been able to handle the Cubs. And also you get a Blue Jays team that certainly is not the best and not as great as they are when they're at home. So for sure. This is definitely a series for them to get back to that half glass full type of narrative of like, hey, we've had a bad week, but we can turn it around. What better time than at home against a team 15 games over 500 that we handled them out on the road.
Yeah, for sure. Joe, same question to you. What are your expectations for this Phillies team during the week? Can they finally break the camel's back for this upcoming week, my friend?
James, last week I said that this team should have gone 5-1. They went 1-5.
Yeah.
And
yeah, man.
That stings, not just for the team.
It's a sour grape in your mouth.
Yeah, because I was made to believe, I was sold a bag of goods that I thought was going to show up and show out, and they just didn't. It was like the magician. I was going to a magic show, and the magician never showed up. That was the greatest disappearing act of all time.
Yeah.
So I'm going to meet her expectations, and I'm going to say that this team is going to do 3-3 in the next 6 games. I feel like they lose the Cubs series, but they take the Blue Jays series. Because the Blue Jays, I feel like, are still not the better offensive team. Mm-hmm. And they're not even at full strength with their pitching. Right. I think the Cubs are still, hitting their stride. Mm-hmm. And, it's going to be tough for the pitchers. for our starting pitchers. But Zach Wheeler's come off a big layoff for paternity leave. Congratulations. And number two, you have Mick Abel back in the saddle again at CBP, which ought to be really good for Mick. That's great. And we're still figuring out the Lazaro riddle. So I'm not 100% sold on that series. Not because I'm not sold on the starting pitching. It's I'm not sold on what Phillies team I'm going to see offensively or bullpen wise. The
What
start
team's gonna
I'm with
show
Mark.
up? Yeah.
Right. I'm with Mark. I have immense confidence in the starting pitching. That's the least of my concern.
Mm-hmm.
My major concern is everything else. Because you're talking about 2/3 or even like 3/4 of the team. Because if you add the other quarters being outfield defensive play, because as I brought up earlier, that's been a calamity. When you bring up bullpen pitching, when you bring up just hitting at the plate and being consistent. I mean, I'll go back to a prime example. Baum was on third base. It was a one-run game. There was a tie game.
Yeah.
And all you had to do with no outs, all you had to do was get him home. There are so many things that get taught to you in Little League
I know.
that should not have happened, that he got stranded on third. So
No, you're
I'm
absolutely
saying
right.
I'm saying the next 6 games, I'm metering my expectations. I'm still sticking with the flag that this is a World Series contending team, but I am metering my expectations for this upcoming weekend, saying 3-3.
So you're saying they're going to be? So you're saying they're going to be 500 along the way? So it makes sense. I mean, I'm in the same boat as you, Joe. I think this Phillies team. I think the Cubs series is going to be like they're going to be looking on the outside, looking in. Obviously, they got one. I mean, the Cubs are just playing their backsides off all year long, and I think it's going to be a good test. For the Blue Jays, though, I gotta say a lot about Bo Bichette and Vlad Guerrero Jr. But man, if only the Phillies could have reached out to get Vlad Guerrero Jr., I would have been more intrigued about it right now when he was a free agent too. But that's the one that got away. Like Frank Finnegan was a big fan of, and I think it would have helped us out just a little bit. Hey, we got Trot Jr. I mean, we could have got Vlad Guerrero Jr. too. You know, like what? Like I mean, come on.
Yeah.
I mean that's the thing that drives me crazy about it. Obviously, I mean this is a baseball podcast, not a football podcast, but overall, that's gonna do it here today for this portion of this week in Phillies baseball. Mark, I'm not sure if you have any other shows on here on the network, but where can people see you next here on these airwaves, or any particular reason?
I'll be here June 18th and this week in Phillies baseball.
Nice. And Joey, same question to you. Where, I mean, obviously, what do we got? I guess we're gonna do some Philly fame legends during the week, and I think we got the Paz and Av Sports Show. I'm not sure that Fly Like an Eagle will take a break this week. I think Mitch is going down the shore for the week. So, I mean, it'll be good to know to get away from this Phillies team, especially down the shore. But what do we got going on this weekend?
Well,
this week?
I'm not entirely sure if our first debut episode of Philly Fame Legends has aired yet or been released yet. But me and James are in the midst of filming some episodes of Philly Fame Legends. Some of our recent episodes include Mike Schmidt, Roy Halladay, and the great Harry Callis. Some of the other ones are going to be just as good with Richie Ashburn, Dallas Green, and so on and so forth. So please stay tuned to these networks. Like and subscribe Hardcore Network and Stream Punk Entertainment, our sister station, and follow me on Twitter on X at JoeWolf112680 for any updates to possible future podcasts.
Very well said, brother. All right, that's going to do it here for us here today. Like I said, I want to thank Joey Marks and Mark Becker joining us here on this edition of This Week in Phillies Baseball. Mark will be back next week, but I think I'll be off for the next couple weeks so I can try to decompress with this Phillies team and try to focus on other stuff.
James has to go to therapy.
Well, I've been in therapy, and I think I probably need to go in therapy again. This was a therapy
Yeah.
session show
Yeah.
for sure for everybody out there. But everybody who tuned in, and also thank you to everybody who tuned in and also joined us here today. Now for Joey, for Mark, for myself, and this has been This Week in Phillies Baseball. I'm James Scorza saying thanks for watching, everybody. Stay well, stay safe. Until then, let's go Phils, and we'll see you on the other side.